All right, next up, we have the brand experience IP landscape, which is a very important discussion to have. We're just at, the tipping point of having these meaningful discussions about this, but it's really something that brands should be aware of going into investing in creating assets and these experiences. And we have more friends of mine because since I'm the host, I get to pick all the cool people. So we have Linda Ritchie who's going to be moderating this panel, and I'll let her do the introductions for everyone else. But good luck today on your panel, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you,
Hi,
Cynthia.
bye.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. We have a very exciting panel for everyone today. In this session, we're going to be talking about protecting IP on the frontier of a new medium. But first, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Linda Ritchie. I am the founder of Decahedralist. It is a boutique innovation strategy consulting firm. I've been advising companies and investors on emerging technologies and business strategy for my entire professional history, which is, of course, only 2 years because I'm only 20 years old. These past few years, I've become a passionate advocate and voice for what is now called the metaverse. We use that word. I've been thinking, writing, and speaking on the impact of it will have on business and life in general, and I just absolutely love the field. So I am joined by three very distinguished panelists today, three people with very different backgrounds, and that always makes for a super interesting and lively discussions because we get a lot of points of view. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves because they can do it best. So Cynthia, let's start with you. Please introduce yourself. She is one of the best job titles you'll ever hear.
So Cynthia Maller, head of 3D creative technology at Walmart. What does that mean? I work on behalf of merchandising and marketing to use 3D models to create beautiful scenery and other content, whether it's online, offline, and just a huge advocate of the way that this technology scales the value internally. I have a background in brand, so I love the merging of those two things because they do merge and in very interesting ways, to your point. So thank you for having me.
Very cool. Thank you for being here. Greg, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Linda. And hey, everyone out there. Thanks for having me. And it's great to be presenting today. So I had a previous life in traditional film and television, doing post-production and visual effects. And then at a certain point, I had to reinvent myself, cross the chasm over into the immersive media and technology side, and jumped into VR back in, I think, about 2015 with Google Cardboard, and started to have events, just all over with Chris Sattelli at South by Southwest and Sundance and Coachella and CES to help the community kind of connect with, the public, help the immersive community help connect with the public so that they can get access to all the cool stuff that people are creating. And then most recently, I started working with, well, actually not that recently, since 2017, I started working with Hologate, which is a company out of Munich, Germany. I'm Senior Vice President of US Operations. Been there from the very beginning when we had, no business to now being in 38 countries. And the team is out in London right now, giving a sneak peek of our Ghostbusters VR Academy. So
awesome.
We're really excited about that. And I also just yesterday found out that I got voted back in as co-vice chair for the Producers Guild New Media Council. So
there you go. See, you slacker. You slacker.
I'm just grateful that getting this support with these different groups. So
it's good to have you here. So good to have you here. Han, last but not least, you're bottom of my screen. So that's the order I went in. Please introduce yourself.
Hi all, my name is Han. I'm an entertainment attorney at Shepherd Mullen. We're a big law firm in the US and internationally. We have over 1,000 lawyers. But we also have a very thriving entertainment practice. We represent studios, film and TV studios, music companies, VR, metaverse companies, and have a lot of kind of NFT related projects, fintech, So we've been working in the space for quite some time, and I specifically not only work with traditional entertainment companies, but I work in the intersection between entertainment and tech, specifically focused on doing a lot of IP transactions in this space, new companies trying to use existing IPs and vice versa.
That's fascinating. I mean, what a cutting edge career, to be honest. Everybody here, to be fair. All right. So now that we've done the introductions, we have some ground rules. This is a conversation. I'm not going to be lobbying questions at one person at a time. You all sit there and answer your question nicely. Please, I want this to be more like a bunch of friends sitting around chatting and talking about a space that we really love. So it's not a formal question and answer session. Jump in, comment, add, disagree. Disagree is always good. Whatever comes to mind. So that's the background. Let's get to it. Now, there's a lot of aspects to this subject that we could talk about, right? I really had a great conversation with each of you individually, and I wanted to start off the discussion about exploring some things that the new Web3 and XR technologies are enabling. For example, one of the interesting things that I am watching and that I find fascinating is that traditional verticals are blurring as they bump into each other. And this is what the technology is allowing to happen. So for example, I have a bunch of favorite examples, but Fortnite is an oldie at this point, but a goodie. It's a gaming platform, and all of a sudden they're doing music concerts and they're probably hosting fashion shows. I don't know at this point. Traditional luxury apparel brands who you would have never thought about doing stuff in this world are all of a sudden dressing avatars. Media, entertainment, moving from narrative to, we're in early days, but moving to a narrative to a full-blown experience without a linear story, so engagement. So I would love to hear, what are some of your favorite examples of this? And then talk about how we talk about brands and IP in that kind of environment. So Cynthia, what's one of your favorite examples?
I really love the authenticity of Roblox. I know it's not necessarily, the most fashion forward, but it's a harbinger, I think, when it comes to the user-generated, user-created content. I really think that it is setting a really good example, and maybe even one that's easy for folks to just go on and observe and then understand what does it mean to have these layers of platforms, right? So I enjoy Roblox. So,
fair enough. No worries. We're not going to hold it against you.
I feel like if that makes me like 17 again, then that's
awesome. It's good. I think you can see the possibilities, and that's always makes stuff interesting. Greg, how about you? Do you have a favorite?
You know what? I'm just impressed on how brands are looking at platforms like Roblox or Fortnite, where they're saying, listen, those are the eyeballs. Those are the potential consumers. They're already there. How do we then learn about these ecosystems and figure out a way to incorporate our brand, whether it be like what you mentioned earlier, Linda, it's about the fashion, right? The digital fashion. As long as the brands are authentic, it's in sync with their demographic, with their brand, so to speak. And I like that, because what I saw when I first started getting into VR was that when people started talking to me about advertising for VR, I said, wait a minute, we got to think that there isn't even, a minimal, viable product yet, right? Yeah. Minimum viable product. There isn't even an ecosystem. So first we have to start out with getting those headsets out there, getting the public awareness out there, and then maybe if there's enough traction, we can then start incorporating brands so that we can start to monetize these spaces. And I think we just saw that article last week about Roblox now starting to incorporating ads. And people say, oh, more ads.
Backlash,
we have to find some way to monetize our content and our platform. So I just think that those really stand out. Not to be a cop out and kind of coattail on Cynthia's response, but I really think that that's an important thing to look at, because you have the viewers. And look at what has happened over the last, 10, 15 years, when commercials were starting to lose its viewership, because people start to drift away from free television, right? Start with cable, and then all of a sudden, all these other distractions or options like social media and content without ads. So the fact that they're trying to adopt this new technology, incorporate their brand, I think that that's you have to go where the people are right now, and then we'll see how they do, and then hopefully all of us can kind of emulate that.
Han, from a legal perspective, I think it might be interesting. You have a different eye when you look at this stuff. I'd love to hear what you think is what was your reaction to that comment from before?
Yeah, I mean, I think these IP holders trying to find new audiences to connect with different folks that they traditionally do not is something that a lot more companies are exploring. And as general counsel for these companies, either from representing the IP holders, I mean, my favorite example is Gucci trying to do an NFT project, right? This is you're thinking traditional luxury companies that you would usually think that would be very hesitant to jump into something so not controversial per se, but it's taking a risk, and that's exciting. And from when we're representing those, especially those high valued IP holders, we always go into trying to first figuring out what is this technology platform, even though what rights are we granting to them, and what are the scope of rights do we grant to them, what are the limitations of what can you do, but more importantly, what can't you do? So those are the things that we always exactly. Right. What you shouldn't be doing.
I spent a lot of I worked in advertising back in digital agency in 99, 2000, like one of the first ones. And we spent a lot of time talking clients out of stuff as well, because it wasn't right for their brand. It's exactly right. It's like, it doesn't make any sense for you to be there. If we have a given that brands have always been, to your point, vigilant about protecting their IP in their own verticals, right? We still think in verticals for the most part, but now these are blurring. So what do you think some of the biggest challenges the brand IP faces as they enter this new world, particularly given that blurring that we're talking about? So you can do it by entertainment, you can do it by industry, you can talk about, media and entertainment brands and retail brands or gaming brands, or you just talk about it in general. What are some of the biggest challenges you think brand IP faces?
I think, if I can jump in, I think a lot about who's going to own the customer relationship when that happens. And it's important to think about how you're going to handle that one way or another. And, you can look at examples now of services that offer other services. I'll just think about Instacart, for example, or DoorDash. When something goes wrong, who am I going to perceive is the problem?
Right.
So, and that's a on purpose mashing together of things. But when these things happen, and it could be seen as a organic or forced co-branded partnership, and you have to say, like, should we be partnering if it happens deliberately? And then who gets the customer? I mean, this is always the thing, right? So I think about that a lot, especially with traversing. Once we open up those highways, as a retailer, I'm like, well, if they start with me and go somewhere else, there's so many cool things to think about, cool problems, right? So that's one.
Interesting. You're shaking your head, Greg. Yes.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything that Cynthia just said.
No, you're supposed to argue. Please, come on. Jerry Springer
Great funny in the background. I would say that the challenges for any new technology is, when it's in this nascent stage, that it's again, going back to what I said previously, it's that, what are you doing this for? Is it, if the eyeballs aren't there, is it to be one of those first movers? Is it to have the bragging rights of being out there first? And history has shown us that, some of these really stick out in our mind. I remember, we all remember like the Tupac experience at Coachella, right? To me, that was a huge advancement. Like, you had even the recent Magnopus Disney experience, with Remembering, having the app. I don't know if you've done that this week, but you basically, use their QR code. You have a waterfall coming out of your television, fish, kind of populating your living room, which is pretty wild. You have Bandersnatch, right, with Netflix. So it's great when you see these risks that these brands are taking with technology that hasn't really been fully fleshed out, and you got to give them props. People say, "Oh, that was kind of gimmicky." It's like, it might have been, and I
give them props because ROI is really hard to calculate on stuff like that. And I think the people who internally manage to get that approved and vision it and actually see it through and sell it, I give them props for that, because a lot of organizations are really conservative about that. So if you can manage to be that innovative and without a clear ROI, that's pretty good, right?
Right, and you're putting your neck on the line, right? If you're that representative at the company that's saying, okay, I think that this is kind of risky, but we're going to give it a shot. If this stuff is new, we're going to get a lot of publicity out of it. But if it goes south, we recover. So,
we have a raft of new technologies that are enabling all of this. So we have the NFTs, we have the blockchain, we have the AR, we have the VR, we have the haptics, we have the AI, we have cryptocurrencies, there's even more, right? It keeps the list continues. They all theoretically will work together in the future. They don't yet. But what are some things that you think brands typically don't think about when they see all these technologies? There's the bright, shiny ball in front of them, and they're like, "Ooh, we want to do this because it's cool." And then they aren't thinking about it. They don't own the narrative. Their brand is completely in a different direction. So what do you think maybe brands aren't considering when they do this? And Han, this is probably a lot of your expertise here. But what do you think?
Sure. So when we, advise clients when they're trying to work with new technology, or new technology companies trying to work with other IP or other IP holders, I think we try to highlight, hey, like, what are the technological limitations of this? For example, selling and minting an NFT at a particular platform, that's fine, but what happens when you resell them? A lot of the value proposition has been, hey, if you sell it, you'll be able to track resale value, and you can assign royalties automatically, or royalties to the rights holders. But there are technological limitations when a particular NFT is sold on a different platform, right? If it's on a different, for example, if you don't have your marketplace agreement has a marketplace agreement with OpenSea's, some of the royalty allocations may not be honored if it's sold outside your platform. So there are things that you can contractually negotiate and ensure that you get, but if it's technologically impossible to really enforce, what's the point? So understanding the risks of and the limitations of what these technological advancements are offering is really important.
Cynthia, I can almost hear you thinking about brand dilution, and Greg probably as well. How is the possibility for brand dilution? For example, again, we go back to Balenciaga, who's a very old French brand that was very haute couture, and all of a sudden they're selling $500, baseball caps. What is brand dilution in this world, and how do you leverage these tools in a way that doesn't have that happen? That's a hard question to answer, but
I take comfort in the fact that we go back to our traditional brand architecture and really sit and look and realize that those rules still apply. Like, we want to go through that brand imperative where we go from known to known for something I care about. And I think along that spectrum, we get dilution anyway, because you can't really, you only can control so much. And so it's not a new problem. I take some comfort in that. And I just think all day long, like, we can't control everything, and we're going to have to get comfortable with stuff running away from us.
Well, we said all that. We said all that 20 years ago when the internet came, right?
Yeah,
it was the same story. It was like you can't dictate; you have to engage. It's more about relationship. So this is like the umpteenth step beyond that because you actually can't really control it at all.
Yeah, and isn't it a great thing if people steal your stuff and leverage it for their own stuff? I don't know, but we have to, giving away content has always been somewhat of a good strategy. And then what do people do with it? It's like that free sample, only that's just so pedestrian. But the dilution maybe needs to be redefined because currently we think about like gray market, so to speak, as being dilution. But we really actually need to think now, just the same way that we're redefining the R and the I, right, in ROI. Well, let's think about what is dilution or could it mean, and then ask what is the cost of failure, and then put in what we can put in terms of guardrails. But to Hans' point, things are grabbable. They've always been grabbable, and then what? It's like digital shoplifting is just going to happen. I don't know.
I've never heard that term. I like it, actually. Digital shoplifting.
Yeah, it's a diluted answer. Maybe that's appropriate.
No. I want to ask you another question, but I want to give Greg a chance to say something before I do.
Yeah, and there's the challenge. Herein lies the challenge is that you want to take a risk. You don't want to be overexposed with having too many failures with these risks that you take with new technology, with new media. But then you have people like Cynthia and Han that are in the position to basically give guidance, right? Hey, here, I'm gonna paint the whole picture for you. Here are the pros and cons, and here's where the technology is at the stage. It's not quite fleshed out. We don't have the distribution chain. I mean, and I was part of the whole 3D, resurrection in the early 2000s, and we were thinking this is it, right? But then what would happen is that there was everyone had to, the whole food chain had to be in line. You had to have the studios, the content creators, the technology people, the distributors, and it just didn't quite come together. And I think we're seeing that again. So again, all of us presenting all of the pros and cons. This is not quite fleshed out. We don't have full distribution to create that consumer touch point yet. You still want to do it, and then ultimately it's still up to the client. And then we sort of, hold our breath and go for the ride, go along for the ride. And
I had a client once, it was the CMO of Hilton. Or it was big client, and Second Life was around, and she would come in every morning and she would be like, why are we doing this? And I was like, okay, let's look at your core demographics. They're 55-year-old men traveling midweek for business in the middle of the country. They have zero interest in having a relationship with your brand outside of the work hours and in Second Life. Like I would have these conversations with clients, and it isn't just about the bright shiny ball. It's about actually going back to your point, Cynthia. What is your brand? What are you trying to achieve? But it was quite funny because she kept us on our toes for sure.
So if there's one thing that I can add, and which I didn't include about 3D, is that I was being asked to all these big meetings, and then the first thing I would say is this appropriate for your brand?
Right.
Exactly.
Right? Is it going to be gimmicky with stuff like just shooting out of the screen? Is that a band that is going to move the needle with 3D? Here's our chance to possibly make this happen this decade. Are we going to cheapen it by just having spears coming out of the screen, or we're going to have a band that nobody knows about? But Greg, it's in 3D. Yeah, but does that give us anything? Does that add anything to the brand, to with that experience? Or are you just doing, as Sophia and Amy Peck had mentioned earlier this morning, is it tech for the sake of being tech? And we have to almost make that the invisible part so that we can say, wait, we'll figure out the tech with you, or the technicians will do that. Let's just figure out what the ultimate goal is here, and if we can't reach that, let's pass. Let's not do this.
And Greg,
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
No,
so I was going to
yeah,
say, Greg, you would.
We don't have much time left. I'm sorry, Cynthia, go ahead.
Well, remember every time a new lens or a new rig would come out, you would get people just using it. Like, I think like shaky cam is responsible for a whole lot of nausea. Steadicam, shaky cam, motion control, whatever, anamorphic.
Yeah.
Like it was like you could see. I mean, there were people who were just trying to use it. So that will happen, so I'm just going to force my story or my brand into it. It's just going to happen. It always happens. We have to people get it out of their system. And
we always leave all new technologies lead with the technology, and it isn't about the technology. It's about the experience and what you can achieve with it. So I think we're still going through that, and we will grow out of that as the industry grows. I wanted to just ask one question about WebXR, since it's a WebXR summit. What do you think the impact of WebXR, not that I just said technology, but given that it's web-based, so there might be some different IP considerations, because copying and other things might be easier to do if it's web-based. And I don't know if that is the case, but I just would love to hear your thoughts on, because if you're in a closed technology, then it's a lot harder to have IP stolen and stuff like that. But on the web, maybe it won't be. So I could be wrong about that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Me specifically, or we have
Yeah.
others. So for me, it's great because it's a gateway. So from the consumer standpoint, it's so important, because even when we talk about like AR, not everybody can leverage it. So what can we give people? So that part I like, and it's just, things are grabbable. I mean, things are just going to get grabbed. And that doesn't mean we should accept it or feel good about it. But the more people we draw to it, they all have like an inner, like some of them have an inner bad actor in them. So from a consumer standpoint, I think it's all a good thing. The residual shrapnel, it's already there, right? Again, a diluted answer. I'm famous for that.
Not at all.
It's appropriate.
I love that.
That's appropriate.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, from an IP holder's perspective, we try to make sure, like, hey, because those things will happen, most likely your IP will be taken, and used by other folks. You want to make sure that you have your ducks in a row where all your IPs are registered, your trademarks are registered, and it's comprehensive, and to cover exactly web-based use, and also copyrights are registered, patents are registered as well. But also, it's not only on registration so you can enforce, it's also just you should be vigilant about monitoring different places where these kind of infringements are likely to happen, right? So, I think that's where, first you got to make sure your IP is buttoned up and you can actually enforce it, or kind of scare someone to just say, hey, you should think twice about doing that. And also it's about, the first point of contact, right? The technology company that is creating some of these assets for you, you need to make sure to put in contractual provisions that could give necessary approvals and controls in order for them to not create a product that, if it's, some very subpar product is online and presented, that would be really damaging for your brand, right? So making sure there are procedures baked into approvals and controls in order so you're comfortable with the thing that's going to be presented to the world in the web that is going to be really consumed by everyone.
All right. On that note, guys, I wanted to say thank you, because we were out of time. I told you it would go fast. Greg, how do people find you?
It's my full name on all of my social, Gregg Katano, Katano, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter.
You're everywhere. You're at every event. You're everywhere. I know that. Cynthia, how can they find you?
I think from a professional standpoint, I think I'm just boring in LinkedIn. My social media is focused on figure skating, so you just reach out to me if you want.
I'm following all her figure skating stuff.
Han, if you want people to find you, how do they find you?
Oh, just
Yeah.
just reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. And yeah, so I didn't think ahead with social media. I was skating all the time when so.
Han, how do they find you?
Yeah, you can find me by Googling my name, Han Kim, and on our firm website, there's my contact. You can also find me on LinkedIn.
Sounds great. You can find me at lindaritchie.com as well. So I look really red. I don't know why, but it was nice to chat with all of you, and good seeing you all here.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Right.
Awesome.